Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I hope you all are fine. So finally, I have to start with the video lecture series because now I feel that university is no more resuming for the semester. So when we were having the regular class, we have completed 5 chapters. So I will continue from chapter number 6 to chapter number 10, and the book which we are following is Geosystems by Robert W. Christopherson. So before starting with chapter number 6, I felt that I should revise chapter number 5 so that we guys can have a tempo of starting, of continuing the classes which were on hold for the last 3 months. So let's start with the revision of chapter number 5, which was about global temperatures. So we started the chapter with the definition of temperature. Temperature means the average kinetic energy of particles in any. Excuse me for the distraction. I have a lot of kids at my home. That's why I don't like to go for the live classes. Anyways, I was defining temperature. Temperature is a measure of average kinetic energy of individual molecules in a matter, as you can see here. So basically, temperature is present everywhere on everything, but when we talk about the global temperature, we talk about the temperature of atmosphere and the particles in the atmosphere. Along with the temperature, there is another terminology which is mostly used, which is the terminology of heat. We generally mix up these two terminologies, but there is a difference. Temperature is the energy which is stored inside the particles, while heat is the flow of that energy. And that energy flows, it becomes heat, and when it is stored in the body, then it is temperature. Okay, then we see we have 3 temperature scales which are used globally. So the first one and the most commonly used temperature scale is the Celsius scale, which is also called as the centigrade scale. The second one is the Fahrenheit scale, while the third scale is called as the Kelvin scale. So the scientists who proposed these scales were Daniel G. Fahrenheit, who gave the Fahrenheit scale, and that scale was named after him, followed by the Celsius scale, which was invented by Anders Celsius. Then the Kelvin scale, which was invented by English scientist William Thomson, but he was famous by the name of Lord Kelvin. So the scale which was invented very first was the Fahrenheit scale, and he actually used the freezing point of water, which was 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and from freezing point to the boiling point of water, he kept 180 divisions. So according to Fahrenheit scale, 32 degrees Fahrenheit is the melting point of ice, while 212 degrees Fahrenheit is the boiling point of ice. But after 1 year, Anders Celsius developed another scale, which is up till now the most widely used one. So he said no, the melting point of ice he kept at 0 degrees Celsius, while he kept the boiling point of ice as 100 degrees Celsius. So these two temperature scales were kept according to the boiling point of water and melting point of ice, because ice and water is the component which is present in the earth in the most abundant amount. So after that, many years later, Lord Kelvin came up with the concept of making a scale using the kinetic energy of particles. So his scale starts with the kinetic energy. According to the Kelvin scales, the absolute zero is the temperature where the kinetic energy of molecules becomes zero. Now the molecules, the kinetic energy of molecules are basically the vibrations in every type of particle. So that vibration stops at 0 degree Kelvin, and that is considered as zero, absolute zero, or the 0 degree Kelvin. And according to the Kelvin scale, the melting point of ice is 273 Kelvin, while the boiling point of boiling point of water is 373 degrees Kelvin. Now let's come to the instruments which are used to measure the temperature. So it's basically thermometer, and two types of thermometers are quite common: the mercury thermometer and the alcohol thermometer. Mercury thermometer is more efficient than the alcohol thermometer, and these types of these devices are kept inside special devices as shown in the picture here, which is the instrument shelter. Before this instrument shelter, the thermometers were kept in another device, which is kind of a box, which was called as the Stephenson's screen. So those boxes or the instrument shelters are kept in the weather stations around the world, and according to the book, some more than 5 years back, they said there were 16,000 weather stations, but now I guess there are more. So according to that, they record the daily mean temperature by noting down the maximum daily temperature and the minimum temperature. Maximum temperature of 24 hours is recorded at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, while the minimum temperature in 24 hours is recorded at 6 a.m. in the morning. So you just add up the two values and divide with 2, you will get the daily mean temperature. With the daily mean temperature, they find out the monthly mean temperature, and with the help of monthly mean temperature, annual mean temperature ranges are calculated, which gives the idea about the climate of an area, that what are the average temperatures in any given month. Now, what are the factors which affect temperature? So the factors which affect temperature are named here as principal temperature controls. So the factors are latitude, over here as you can see, latitude. Second factor is altitude and elevation. Third factor is cloud cover, and the fourth factor is land water heating differences. Now according to latitude, we can say that the higher you go according to a latitude, the lower the temperature will be. So these are the lines of latitudes which are called as parallels. So if you go higher towards the North Pole in the northern hemisphere from equator is 0 degrees and North Pole is 90 degrees. So the higher you go from 0 to 90, the temperature will be lower. So this is the effect of latitude on temperature in a generalized manner. The second factor or the second temperature controlling factor is altitude and elevation. Let's have a look at the difference between altitude and elevation. Altitude is generally the height, the vertical height of anything. For example, if an aeroplane is flying, so it will have an altitude. Like we would say the aeroplane is flying at an altitude of 2000 meters above the surface, or 3000 meters. While elevation is the height of land surface, where you are standing on the ground. That point will be measured from the sea level. So that is elevation. So the link between elevation or altitude with the temperature is inverse. Again, the higher you go, the temperature will be lower. If you are standing near the sea level, the temperature will be lower. If you are standing at the top of the Mount Everest, the temperature will be lower. I think I said it wrong. At the sea level, temperature will be high. On the top of the mountain, the temperature will be low. So this is inverse relation. Now according to the elevation factor, we have a special phenomenon or a special feature on Earth's surface which is called as snow line. So snow line is basically the border between non-snow area and the permanent snow area. and the snow line is defined by elevation. Third factor is cloud cover. So cloud cover also affects the temperature. If an area has thick cloud cover, that area will have lower temperature range, while if an area does not have cloud cover, it will have higher temperature range. When I say temperature range, we mean that the daily minimum temperature and the daily maximum temperature. Now let's have a look at the example. Let's consider a desert. In the desert, we do not have cloud cover generally. So due to that, during the day the temperature may rise above 40 degrees centigrade, while at night the temperature may fall up to 10 or even lower. So on average, we see the range is 30 degrees, 30 Celsius degrees. But comparatively, in an area where we have cloud cover, for example, Congo or Indonesia or Malaysia or Brazil's Amazon forest, there we have cloud cover most of the time. So there, due to the cloud cover, the temperature range is very low. For the desert, we have just seen there was a temperature range of 30 degrees, while in a cloudy place, the daily maximum can be up to 27 or 28 degrees Celsius, and the daily minimum would be only 25 degrees Celsius. So it's hardly a difference of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius degrees. So that's how cloud is having an impact on temperature. Fourth factor is land water heating differences, and that's what the nature of land and water is. Land heats up quickly and land cools down quickly, while the water, it takes time to heat up. Similarly, it takes a lot of time to cool down. So this is the general behavior of land and water. And of course, we see water is liquid, land is solid. And this land water heating difference is observed by a common person at the seaside. When you go to the seaside, you cannot stand on the sand at the beach, while if you go into the water during the same time, you feel that the water is cold, but the coastal sand is quite hot. This shows how land and water are showing their behavior against the temperature. So why is that so? That land has a different response to insolation, water has a different response to insolation. So these are the factors highlighted in green. You can see evaporation, transparency, specific heat, movement, ocean currents, and sea surface temperature. So these are the factors which contribute. Now let's have a look at evaporation, how evaporation controls land water heating differences. Water continuously evaporates during the daytime, and due to that evaporation, the surface of water remains cooler as compared to land, while land is a solid particle, so it does not have water on it, or even it has very less amount of water, so less evaporation takes place. This is one of the reason. Now second one is transparency. Land is not transparent, it's solid and opaque. Water is transparent, so due to that transparency, land does not allow the insolation, the solar radiation, to penetrate, as you can see in the diagram, figure 5 here on the screen. So it does not allow, the land does not allow the sunlight to penetrate, while here you see these red lines. This is the penetration of sunlight due to the transparency of water. So water is absorbing more energy, it is taking time to heat up, and land, since it's not allowing the sunlight to penetrate, so it heats up quickly. This is the role of transparency. Now the specific heat, basically specific heat is the heat capacity of any substance. Water has more capacity, it can store a lot of heat, while land does not have that much capacity. It's just like a small bucket and a large bucket. Small bucket will fill up quickly and a large bucket will take time to fill up. So that's how specific heat plays its role. Then movement, land is solid, so the particle of land do not move, they only vibrate about their position, while the water molecules, they move from one place to another within that. And as told by Robert Brown, in the form of Brownian motion. So water particles move, and that movement distributes the heat energy throughout the water surface. Next is ocean current, movement of ocean in a certain direction from a hot area to a colder area, and from cold area to a hotter area. So because of that movement, water takes time to heat up and similarly to cool down because of this movement. Sea surface temperature is dominated by the wave movement. Surface of sea is continuously in a state of movement due to wind, which are called as wave movement. So because of wave movement, sea surface does not heat up very quickly. Now we have some examples of different places in the earth and their ranges of temperature. Here you see in Kansas the temperature range is quite high, from 32 degrees to -7, and then here in California we see the temperature range is quite low, from 4 degrees to 21 degrees. Now as a whole, land water heating differences create two special phenomena which are called as continental effect and the maritime effect. As you can see in the pictures, the picture on the left hand side, it shows an area which has maritime effect, since it is near the sea, while the picture on the right hand side shows an area which has continental effect. So these are the two cities of United States. One is San Francisco, whose temperature range are shown in the graph over here, while the second one, the continental one, is the Kansas in United States. Now, what marine effect and continental effect do? Marine effect happens or takes place in areas which are near the sea, and because of marine effect, the temperatures of that area remains moderate. It does not go to extreme. For example, the climate or the temperatures of Karachi in summers, the temperatures do not rise that much as compared to a continental area like Lahore, where the temperatures are much higher in summers. Similarly, in winters, Karachi does not have very low temperatures, while Lahore has very low temperatures. So these are the marine effect and continental effect. Now, when we talk about all four temperature controls, which are number 1 latitude, number 2 the altitude and elevation, number 3 cloud cover, and number 4 land and water heating differences, these four factors combine to form the temperature of any given area, because every place has certain latitude, every place has altitude and elevation, every place has certain cloud cover, and every place is either located near the sea or away from the sea. So every place, or the temperature of every place, depends upon these four factors at the same time. This is the reason Mount Everest is located at roughly 32 degrees north latitude, but still it's frozen because it has elevation. So the role of elevation overcomes the role of latitude, which is quite lower in Mount Everest. Similarly, Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania is a mountain which is located near the equator, but still it is frozen at the top, at the summit, just because it has higher elevation. So these are some of the examples that one factor is overcome by the other, but all in all, these four factors contribute together to make up the temperature of any area. Now, some more terminologies regarding temperature. One terminology is isotherm. So isotherm is a line which connects places of similar temperature. Here you see the definition of isotherm is shown on the bottom of the page towards left hand side. This is isotherm, a line which connect places of similar temperature. And then with isotherm there is another terminology, which is thermal equator. So thermal equator is an isotherm which has the highest value. Let's have a look at that in the diagram in the map below. So on that map you see this dotted continuous line is the thermal equator, and all the other lines are isolines or isotherms. Therm mean temperature, so iso means same. So isotherm is a line which connects same temperature. So this red area, it shows that there we have higher temperatures, while the yellow ones are lower, and the purple and white ones are the lowest temperature, or we can say the coldest area. So here you see this is the isotherm map for the month of January, and in the month of January the thermal equator is located slightly south of the actual equator, which is over here, the 0 degrees straight line equator. And thermal equator is not a straight line because along the equator the places do not have similar temperature. And why? Because of the 4 factors we have just discussed. So we have the thermal equator, which is not a straight line, but of course it is dividing the earth into two halves on the basis of its value. Thermal equator always have the highest value. So here we see some thermal equator which is slightly south of the actual equator, and this is January, when we have summers in the southern hemisphere and winters in the northern hemisphere. That's why the position of equator is thermal equator is shifted southwards. Now here is another map which shows the isotherm map for the world for the month of July. So here we see the difference. Here is equator, the actual equator, this white straight line, while the thermal equator has moved towards north. This is in the month of July, when in July in the northern hemisphere we have summers, and in the southern hemisphere we have winters. So that's why the thermal equator has shifted northward. So this is how the thermal equator shifts according to the different seasons. And for that we have done the NLM chart, the sun's declination and subsolar point. So that's how it happens. Now the last two terminologies of the chapter were wind chill and heat indexes. Wind chill is the response of our skin to the temperature in the atmosphere and in the cold season, while heat index is the response of our body to the air temperature in the hot season. Due to wind chill factor, a person may suffer frostbite, while due to heat index, a person may suffer heat stroke. So this is a chart which shows, and there are two factors which affect both the things, the wind chill factor and the heat indices. And those two factors are the temperature of the atmosphere and the wind speed. If we have more wind speed in winters, it will be higher wind chill effect, which would lead to frostbite in a shorter time, as shown in this diagram. The purple color combination is the combination of lower temperature with high wind speed. That means a person has the chance of getting frostbite in a very short span of time, while the white one, a person may have frostbite in a longer period of time. While heat index, if the wind speed is more, the heat index will be lower, and if the wind speed is lower, the heat index will be higher. So that's the summary of chapter number 5. Thank you very much for listening. Inshallah, in the next video I will continue with chapter number 6. All the best. Allah Hafiz.